have an attendee ID number, please enter it now, followed by the pound sign. There is one other participant in this conference.
Is Adam Crahan, the newly appointed Tableau Zen Master, and he's a head of data visualization engineering at Pluralsight. And for all you social media fans out there, he goes by Acrean on Twitter.
Okay, you probably already know the Drexel Pooja, as she's known on the Twitters here. She's Tableau Zen Master and lead visualization analyst here at Comcast. She's also the CEO of the Data Duo. All right, so today's format, our format is going to be a little conversational. We're going to be interchangeably switching roles between being a stakeholder and an analyst. And as analysts, we often wear a lot of hats. We translate for different parts of the business. Sometimes we know the business better than the business people themselves through the data. So we're going to go through some scenarios tonight about actual hands-on things that we've experienced at work, and hopefully you can take that back and make that a part of your everyday Tableau lives.
All right, so let's get started and design a dashboard. Well, not quite. We are here today to talk about the overall user experience when you design a dashboard, not just a traditional static BI dashboard. And for this specific use case, I'm going to be playing the role of a stakeholder, and Adam is going to be the amazing analyst that we have in-house. I'm from a marketing team, let's say, and I need a funnel chart to track conversion of my customers into a paying customer. I know it's a kind of a weird request. Not many times we see a funnel chart in a data visualization created for work. But that's my request, and I have a general idea of what I want to see, and I created that mock-up in PowerPoint.
Oh, great.
And I sent it to my analyst.
PowerPoint?
And I need that by the end of the week to close an important deal. So over to you, Adam.
All right, so my first reaction is, let's take a look at this PowerPoint chart. Does anybody in the room want to yell out, raise your hand, whatever, what your reaction is to the funnel chart that they created in PowerPoint? Is it good? Is it bad? Would you change anything? Somebody help me out.
Come on, Comcast.
Jake says thumbs down. Not proportional. Thank you. Anything else? All right, we'll talk about black dashboards later. All right, so my initial reaction was great. We have in-house, I'm a data analyst business person, probably has an MBA, and they did this in PowerPoint. Yay. All right, so let's actually break down the chart. So as Sean said, it's not proportional. If you look at the 34%, the second tier, it's about 70% of the actual top of the triangle, which is 100%. So let's see what it actually means. There are 4 different tier levels. It's basically looking at the number of users who hit a landing page on a website, started filling out a registration form, the people that completed a registration form, and then the people that did whatever we wanted them to do, right? So they're the people that we really care about, and this is the funnel. Hey Pooja, what does that triangle actually mean?
It's just a triangle, you know, that's just the request that I had.
Oh, okay. I thought you were Zen Master.
It doesn't really mean anything.
Okay. Also, I found confusing multiple percentages on each line, so that's probably not going to be great for somebody who's reading it. Colors aren't bad. Say what you will about the black, but the gray and the blues, actually, I'm okay with the colors. So immediately in my mind, I thought I would not do a funnel chart. So you said you also had some targets. Are those going to be changing, or are those locked in place?
No, so the targets right now are pretty static. They're not going to change, and we have our targets already in place for annual conversion.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay. So before I start any dashboard, I like to think about what are the factors to consider. The main thing is the audience. So who is this going to be? So for my conversation with Pooh, I know it's going to be marketing people and salespeople. They're probably going to dump it in a PowerPoint. So I'm not going to do a lot of interactivity. So that's, I kind of have the context about how it's going to be used, the format it will be used. Clearly, data literacy is a problem for Pooja. We're going to use some simple charts that she can understand, and minimal use of color. So before I started on this is a real project, I Googled funnel chart, and I can see just by the look on your faces, a few of you are also throwing up in your mouth. This is the first thing that comes up as a Google image when you search funnel charts. I was a little disappointed to see that the chart that I was going to build was in here. Does anybody know what a bikini chart is? Show of hands. This is our audience participation. 1, 2, okay, 3 or 4. All right, bikini charts are these guys. They're bars, bigger at the top, smaller at the bottom. Looks like a bikini. That's kind of what I had in mind. I was not real excited to see it next to 3D, whatever that thing is in the top right. All right, so I'm actually going to demo how I solved this problem, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. I'm going to go over to my worksheet. I'm going to come out of presentation mode so that it's familiar for you. All right, so you'll notice I already have 2 filters on my sheet. I'm already filtering by an individual date, and I filtered measure names. But I have a good sense of where I'm going to get this data. So I'm going to bring tier onto rows. These are my 4 levels of that funnel chart. I already prepped this particular data set. I'm going to put measure values on columns. Whoa, we're done. We got a bikini chart. All right. So like I said, I already have measure names filtered. So when I drag measure values onto columns, you'll see there's 2 measures that automatically came over on the measure value shelf. The first one is creatively named number. That is the right side of this chart. And the other one is called minus number, because I'm really creative. And that's actually just the same number going to the left. It creates a diverging bar chart, and when you put them all on a consistent axis, you have bars going in either direction. So I thought that was pretty cool, but not very interesting. At least the visual was tied to data, which was what my goal was. The triangle actually made no sense at all. So I decided to see, well, what else could I come up with? Well, let me put this online. Whoops, that broke. So there's a couple of ways that you could do this. If you put measure names on path, you can actually break that line, the zigzag, into individual lines. So it's the same thing as a bar chart, but less ink. I was starting to like this chart. So I'm going to make I already put some colors on those tiers. I work at Pluralsight. We have a lot of bold colors, so I get to use cool colors, like black. So now I've got, okay, I kind of like where this was going. I'm going to make a copy of my measure values pill by holding down Command and putting it in the column shelf. And now you can see I've got two of these things. So I'm going to go to the one on the left by pulling up that individual marks card. And what I'm going to do is put measure values on the path. Okay, now I started to think, now I might have something here. You might notice the colors are kind of funky, which is a happy Tableau accident. Does anybody ever have those? Happy, like, oh, that looks cool, I didn't mean to do that. Funny thing Tableau does, when you have 2 values, discrete values on a line, it tries to find a happy medium in the middle of the line. And so I get that cool purple color in there, which isn't anywhere in my palette, but that's cool, I liked it. So you can see it started to take the shape of a funnel. So that was my main goal. I thought, okay, I actually have data tied to a number. My visual actually looks like a funnel. Maybe I'll do a funnel. Maybe these people will understand it. All right, so what I'm going to do next is put these on a dual axis. So I thought, why don't I combine these 2 charts? And so now I can actually have lines cutting through the area, and maybe it'll make more sense. So I started to like this. But then I thought I really want to label this chart. I want to make it really clear what we're looking at. So I'm going to stick on the line chart, which is the first marks card, and I'm going to put the actual number, if I can find it, on label. Okay, so I don't want to label every point. I just want to label the left side. So what I'm going to do is go to label, align these to the left, and align these into the middle of the vertical so that it's in line with this left side of the chart. And I'm going to change the label to line ends and only label the start of the line. And I broke something. Line ends, start of the line. Okay. That didn't work. What did I do?
Maybe on a different shelf?
Oh, I'm on the wrong shelf. Thanks. I love when Tableau does that.
Pretty nice for not being too data literate.
No, I'm on the right shelf. Okay, so that is going to be on the middle left. I wanted to give some room for my labels, though. So what I did is I calculated a value here that I told you I was creative. It's called ref line. And this is actually just the smallest value on the chart, which is going to be this 185,000 minus 185,000. And I multiplied it by 1.6. So what I can do with that is just drag reference line onto my marks card. And I can add a reference line. I'm going to pick ref line, minimum. And I'm going to have no label, and no line. So what I've done is that line is actually over here, it's invisible, but it crushed my funnel to compress that space and give me more room for the individual labels. And so now I can actually come into my label, and I got a little fancy with it. I gave it some spaces and just some dashes, and hit apply. And so now I can draw individual labels right to that line. So it's a little bit more of a diagram. This isn't any chart that you would normally see in Tableau, but it was something that my audience, my marketing people, would actually understand. They went to school, they hear funnel, and this was the chart, the perfect chart type for their particular need.
Great job, Adam. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like. Like I said, at that plural site, we get to use cool colors like black background. What the heck? Who is slacking me? I thought I put it on Do Not Disturb.
So can you also tell me, Adam, if I'm on pace as of
stakeholder.
today, so that I'm reaching my annual goal on time?
Oh, on the target?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Or when I actually get to start talking about that one. So what we also had to do was build performance to goals for each of these tiers. So this chart, I got a little fancy with it. There's some more dual axis and very little interactivity. But this, everything you see on the left, this is one chart. And so when you hover down on each layer, it'll show the percent from the previous tier. So what that means is 62% divided by 185. Oh my God, a stakeholder.
Oh, our targets have actually changed. So do you have a way to accommodate that request? Now it's not 185,000 anymore.
I thought they weren't going to change.
Yeah, but they change. Requirements keep changing.
Oh, okay. And do we have additional time?
Unfortunately, no. The time is still going to be the same. Probably we needed it yesterday.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So continuing on, I'll deal with that later. These individual percentages are from the previous tier. So I lost 66% from my top tier. I lost another 34%. That's the drop-off rate from the tier 3 here, and all the way down. They also wanted the ability to look at the percent from the top of the funnel. So, but just by switching a parameter right there, I can now say that 62% divided by 185 is 33%, and 41,000 divided by 185 is that 22%. So this was that multiple percentages that they had on their funnel chart. They don't all need to be displayed at once. It's what question are you trying to answer? So now back to my stakeholder.
Thank you, finally.
So this is a chart that I use at work all the time. I love these bar over bar percentage to keep track of different KPIs. So I'm going to actually go into this particular chart. It's a dual axis chart, and I have 4 different tiers with 4 different goals. Apparently those goals were not going to change. So here's the lesson. Anytime somebody gives you a number that's not part of your data set, parameterize that thing. That's going to change. I guarantee. So each one of those tiers, I have a certain number of users in mind that I need to hit a landing page so that a certain number of users can start a form, so that a certain number of users can complete the form so that they can actually do the thing I want them to do. So I have 4 different parameters in here, and you can see I have 1 million as the goal to hit the page. So I can actually change that. So what is the new goal to hit the landing page?
200,000?
Really? It was 1 million before.
Oh, well then you know better.
1,200,000. We practice. So now I can change that, and now my goals have immediately changed. I can now look and say how many users have hit that tier, my new goal of 1.2 million that recently changed, thanks. All of that, it will give me my percentage of my goal attained and whether or not that's above or below the target to achieve the goal. The reason that I like using these bar over bars is it's really simple to do. This is just a min 1. You can just type it in. You just double click on the fill and it's just min 1.0. That's what this gray bar is. It's drawing a line from 0 to 1. That's it. And then calculating a percentage is a way to normalize these 4 different tiers that have different goals. And I can look at them on the same plane. How far along am I towards my goal? So that's the reason I did that, and I built it all off parameters. So when it will, in fact, change, I can just quickly change a parameter. If you show that parameter and you can web edit on Tableau Server, you can just go in and change the number, and you don't even have to republish, which is great. As far as Pooja's request to see how far along she is to the goal, what I did is I actually took the number, the target percentage, and divided it by 365, and then I multiplied it by the days between January 1st and today. So as I flip through this chart, as you can see in January, if I go back to my chart, I need to be at 8% on pace to be above, or to be on target to meet my annual goal. So I'm going to hit the pages shelf here, and you'll see this navigate through some of the charts, the other views, and you'll see some different funnels, and you'll see that line move. So when it hits, after it hits April, it disappears because we haven't been there yet. But that chart will tell us if we're on pace. That simple reference line is real gray, bleeds into the background, and I can see, am I on pace to meet my target or not? So like I said, it was the perfect choice for my stakeholder, but use funnels well. Don't use them for evil. Try to not see a Contigo or a bullet or a traffic cone or funnel. That still haunts me at night. That is my funnel chart.
Great job, Adam.
Is that going to get the deal done?
Yeah, pretty good. Okay, so unfortunately we're going to do a role reversal now. Adam is going to be the stakeholder, the person who would bother with Slack channels, and I'm going to play the role of an analyst.
Okay, so my business case is I have 3 different products. I'd like to see a sales comparison across these 3 different products. I have an idea of what I want to see, and I had my crack shot analyst put it together for me in Excel. His name's Josh. He told me he uses Excel a lot today. And I have an executive meeting at the end of the week. So that's who it's for.
Okay, brilliant. So the crack shot analyst that Adam has, Josh, which has created this little chart in Excel. How many of you think this is very typical? When you get requirements, you have a mock-up that's already created, like in PowerPoint or in Excel, have been asked to replicate that in Tableau, happens quite often. We'll not say anything after that, but is this the best way to utilize the space on the screen? Anybody from the audience? What about different colors? What about the 20 plus slices on the pie?
Yummy.
Pies only look good on plates, not dashboards, unfortunately, especially if it has that many slices. So is there, like we already said, but is there any specific things that you would change on this dashboard in terms of space and how the filters and everything else is just laid out on the screen?
I'd make it black.
No wonder the crack shot analyst is actually Josh, because black is not really allowed here. So, some of the factors to consider, again, like Adam said, is audience relevance. You should definitely know who your audience is when designing a dashboard, because I think that would say a lot about your the way you lay it out and the way the elements speak to each other. Context is very necessary as well. You could say your sales are 50% of what it was last year, but if you don't really see the context to what it was last year, then you're going to lose that audience engagement and attention. Simple charts, not everybody is data literate. We belong to a data visualization community. We are analysts. Some of us have been formally trained. Some of us have a lot of experience, but your users may not. So it's always recommended that you use simple charts. At least that's what I try to use. Minimal use of color, being minimal, it goes really a long way, and we'll talk more about that as I show my charts. And interactivity can be a big thing too, to add interactivity when required and to encourage that more so that you switch a little bit away from your traditional screenshot kind of a dashboard to a more engaging sort of a dashboard. All right, so let's go ahead and demo what my take on that data is going to be. So this is my take. This is how I would design the requirements given. Well, not quite, but I mean, so the point here is that when you don't pay attention to formatting, to laying out your dashboard in a little mindful way, this is how it will look if you just drag and drop into Tableau. Just drag and drop. But even if you change colors, this dashboard, if you see at a glance, is segmented by product, but then it is still a little cluttered. There are too many lines, there are too many grid lines, there are too many axis lines. The side on the right has a filter that's taking a lot of white space. White space is good, but you should also know where to use more of white space. So I'm just going to demo the better version of this dashboard now is this one. So clearly, even on this dashboard, you see a little difference in the left side versus the right side. And this is a new feature in Tableau, that's padding, that Adam brought to my attention just 2 weeks ago, and I was completely hooked when I actually experienced a little bit of padding in Tableau, and I was like, wow, how many of you have used containers before with blank text boxes to use divider lines? Okay, so in the previous version, exactly. Some little small features that you ignore sometimes can be such a big thing in design. You can take down so much of clutter just by knowing what's available out there in Tableau. So let's talk a little bit about padding. This sheet right here is a worksheet that's in a container. So if I double click this, there's a container. So the sheet is in the container. If you go to the Layout tab, you see two different options for outer and inner padding. Outer padding is, think of it as a space that's going to be outside of your worksheet. So in this specific example, I'm going to uncheck all sides equal and going to make the top padding to be 5. Okay, so there is nothing else on the left, right, or bottom of the worksheet. There's just 5 pixel space on top of the sheet, which is in the container. And for the inner padding, I'm going to go ahead and change the zeros, if this clicks on Adam's laptop, to 20. So the chart scrunches a little bit. There's more space on the sides because we didn't give any outer padding to that worksheet. And now if I double click this, that's the container that we're going to shade with this color.
I think you dragged it.
What did it change?
Oh, you're going to give the white inner background, the sheet. It's white background.
That is white.
Well, you're at Comcast. You have to click on the sheet, and then the 20 inner padding didn't go.
No, I thought I already gave the 20. No, that's still not right.
The inner padding only contains.
Oh, that's right. I think I did. Who's that?
Corey.
Go, Corey. So now that is 5. That did not inherit the color. All right, there we go. Something has changed for sure. But you get the general idea. So the blue line on the top of the worksheet is just in a container that has the 5 pixel padding, which is why the line has been created the way you see it there. And for the bottom chart, it's the same sort of a format. Hopefully this works now. So this is the sheet that we're going to the outer padding for that one is going to be 30, and the right side is going to be a 3. So if you see there's a gray padding on top of that sheet now, and for the same sheet, inner padding is going to be 20. So now the bottom chart is crunched, so there is more more like room to breathe, and the gray bar on top is not really another text box or another space or another line that we are used to drawing, and it just looks flawless except for the top part. I don't know what's still wrong with that part here. So the vertical, that's 20. Oh, the container has to be 0. No need to count any spaces here. There you go.
So how many text boxes did you lose? How many would you have used?
So this is what it goes to show, that the feature that you pay attention to a little bit, I think we can get rid of at least 24 text boxes if I can count all the spaces on the inner, the outer, the gray bar, the 2 vertical lines on the bottom chart, and the 3 lines on the top. Just instantly, you can reduce so much clutter on your dashboard, and you don't have to worry about additional text boxes just floating. And if you've seen my work in Tableau Public, there are lots of text boxes. So this is really helpful for me. Okay, now what?
Oh, hey, Pooja.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Hey, turns out I need some more interactivity in that chart for the exec meeting. I got to answer Bob's question. I need to be able to compare it to the overall average, the product average, month over month and year over year. Can you do that?
Sounds very typical.
Great.
Okay, so for this chart here, I have enabled interactivity. What now?
I need that a day sooner than I told you.
Of course, this also sounds really typical. We'll get back to that, but let me show you what I've done so far. So on this chart here, if you see just a single hover, and you're instantly able to see 6 different data points, and let me show you how. On the first chart, you see March 2015 as compared to March 15 sales for other products. So we've not cluttered one chart with 3 different lines to show how effective it can be. And the same month for March 2015, you're able to see how it compares with its own average, own product average. You're also able to see how that month compares with the overall product average. So instantly you're able to see 6 different things by laying out the charts in this way. By not cluttering it in one chart, it could still be effective if you introduce a little bit of interactivity. For the bottom chart now, we'll talk about the calculations, but just quickly going over this chart here. I have context bars set up here, so it goes to show that from 2014 to 2017, what were January sales for each product. It goes to show how that month compared to the same month in the last year. And you can also compare how office supplies is larger in sales than the other products pretty instantly. By having the context, you're also able to show how January's contribution stands compared to the entire year. So there are a few things that I have done deliberately on this dashboard, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before that, let's talk about how this chart is designed. So in here, you see there is a furniture category that's just filtered. Rest of the chart is pretty simple. There are 2 lines. One is for furniture, and one is for overall. The good thing about adding an overall product sales is also that when you have different charts, the axis can be different. But when you introduce an overall chart line, that means that you don't have to really change the axis. Even if it's automatic, it's going to be consistent on the dashboard. That way you don't really have to think about, okay, is the chart synchronized? Is the lines pretty much making sense? And so on. So for this example, I have a calculation that shows total sales as the gray line, and in which I'm just saying to fix it at a month level and give me the sum of sales. So we're not doing anything in terms of filtering out the furniture. The filter is going to be ignored because the fixed calculation is just going to look at the monthly level, and we're going to get the gray line. And for the bottom chart, if you see, when I hover over here, there are these little reference lines that are set up there for the same very reason I just mentioned. So the bottom charts are on a different axis. So to fix that, so that all charts are looking at it in a similar scale, I've created a reference line that looks at the max value of the 3 products by year, and it fixes the axis for that specific chart. That way you're looking at the same chart, that way you're looking at the same axis even though they are different charts. So let's look at the reference line calculation a little bit, which is the reference line calc here.
That's a creative name.
Yeah, you have to get a little literal here. Sometimes I tend to forget if it's just calculation 1. But anyway, so this is a nested LOD. Anybody familiar with nested LODs? Okay, we use it a lot here at work, and I find it really helpful, but only if you understand how the concept works. So the inner loop that you see here is looking at fixed year and the category, and it's giving you the sum of sales. And then the outer loop is looking at the result of that inner loop and giving you the max value. So based on that, the reference line is created if I place it on the detail shelf. So one final time, that's the final dashboard. If you notice, there is a small filter there, which the one that I was changing for the bottom charts is also a good way to use the space on the screen instead of using a big drop-down menu on the side and wasting all of the white space that is there on the dashboard. So there could be a little bit of more creative ways to use it if you think about it a little bit more mindfully. So going back to the slides, I don't know why it is black
I
now.
like it a lot better immediately.
I think this was just my way of telling Adam's crack shot analyst Josh to actually allow us probably to use black dashboards. I think they do look pretty cool, right? So anyway, the deliberate choices that I've made on this dashboard is, although a simple dashboard with just 3 products and sales, you were instantly able to see with one hover 6 different data points. But also, I have laid out the dashboard in a way where you see the overall information on the top, which is where the users are going to pay their attention the very time when they look at it. The middle portion is more contextual data, and the bottom part is more granular information. You know, if you also see that many people tend to remember colors and patterns a little bit more easily, so when they open the dashboard again the next time, they'll really remember the way the dashboard is laid out instead of haphazardly placing the elements on the dashboard. So again, with one hover, you were able to see so many different points, and just going to show that, you know, add interactivity where required. Encourage this with your users. I know static dashboards and just printing it to PDF is so common, but you know, if you are in a meeting, definitely encourage interactivity, because I think you can answer so many ad hoc questions if you have interactivity and not just stuck with one simple view that's on there. So some of our takeaways from today's presentation is that logically laying out your dashboard can go a long way. You know, both of us talked in our dashboards that if you logically place elements, so think about it, the way your users are going to interact with it, the way they're going to click on it, where are they going to look at it first. A lot of things can actually make your dashboards a little bit more obvious and more usable by your audience if you actually logically place it. Context is really important. In Adam's dashboard, you saw the gray bars. In my dashboard, you saw the little bars with context. How much is January sales compared to the whole of year, or how much is one product sale compared to all of the others? That way, even if it does become a static dashboard and if they do print it out, they still at least have some context. Minimalism is great. You know, we have been told so many times, less is more, use less of color. But minimalism also can go in a way that use color sparingly, but use white space generously. That could still be considered minimal because you're using more white space and giving your users a little more extra room to breathe.
And then you also want to make sure you segment your dashboard. So if you didn't notice, we both did that. So I had my 4 tiers segmented horizontally, and Pooh's dashboard was segmented vertically by product in 3 different columns. We achieved that without doing much. We just put some padding on there, and that achieved the segmentation, or a different color, but not a ton of color, just very, very minimal, like she said. Also, interactivity is key, so make sure you know when to use it, when not to use it. I didn't waste a lot of time on it because I was just going to my thing was going to get dumped into a PDF, but still, it's me, so they get some interactivity when they go on and it highlights, but I didn't overdo it. She used it very smartly in her dashboard because Bob needed to answer 6 different things. She was able to get that with one hover. So knowing when to use it and when not is important. And try to keep your dashboard seamless. So as we use that space to segment everything, we use that space to, you notice I had the little parameter in my title. She had the filter in her bar spacing the dashboard. So that experience is seamless to the user. They don't have to go look for it. It's right where they need it. Like, it's right on the chart where they need it. They don't have to go to another place to look at those filters.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you integrate data design, the overall user experience, and like we said, just knowing when to optimize and how to optimize the screen space on the dashboard can definitely go a long way. Bruce, you've been having your hand up for the whole time. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I really like both of the books you guys presented. And Commissioner, your last one, love the way you spelled it. I noticed you had what I would call flags for the data. And that they, so one data point was shown, it was highlighted, the colors attached to a particular category of sales. Very nicely done, and it changed. We're using annotations, labels, it was nice to have that background color constant as the data changed.
The ref line label.
Is this the ref line he's talking about, or just the highlights? These?
Yeah, the square boxes.
Oh, these.
Yeah, oh, okay.
It's just the shading of the reference line.
Got it, okay. I didn't realize it was the reference line. I thought it was a data point as you moved around.
Yeah, I like to use a little shading on it because sometimes if it's just a gray line with a number, it can get lost in the, like in the data points if the line actually overlaps it. So shading actually differentiates it a little bit.
I didn't realize it was part of the reference line. I thought it was part of the line. I'm getting my eyes examined.
Awesome. Please ask questions if you have any. We would love to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah,
sure.
Down there.
I can't hear very clearly.
He wants to change January to February, I believe, in the filter.
It's not stacking it, yeah. It's only showing it for February. That way you're able to compare February sales in 2014, 15, 16, and 17, and with other products. Yep. Yes.
Sounds like you have limited space like that, and you make your graphics small like that. It's really good at making it still clear and concise. Are there any tricks that you use? That sometimes it's kind of out of this, like it's bulk is big. I don't know how to make it look smaller.
I can take that one. So I turn off everything default. No grid lines, borders, axis rulers, axis ticks. Like I wish you could have a author setting to just
add
do
this
that.
dashboard here because the previous view actually showed the same thing.
Yeah. So like I turn all of that off and then drop the size of the fonts. They don't need to be giant. Right, so in small space, change the fonts to like 7 or 8, but make the number pop that is important, make it bigger.
Also, I think another thing is if you have a bar chart, that's just simple bar chart, and it's like the most common used data viz out there, right? I also thin the size of the bars a little bit because I think thicker bars can look chunkier and it can look more inky on the dashboard. So you don't really need to use a really wide sort of a bar chart. You're just trying to show the length of the bar as compared to the other. So I usually try and thin the bars. If I go back to all, you'll see the bars are really thin, it's not really thick, and it's not using too much color. So little minor changes can also elevate your dashboard in terms of design.
Yeah, John?
So for your time series chart at the top, do you have the measure on size too? It looks like the line is thicker at the top than it is.
Yes, I do have the measure on the size, and I've deliberately done that so that it's more clearer and more immediate glance to the users to see where the sale value is higher, even though we're using color to indicate that. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Question. Do you upload these online onto Tableau Public or something?
So we're not going to publish this on Tableau Public, but like Josh said, feel free to email us and we'll be happy to email the workbook to you all, to anybody who emails it.
You have 100 something.
Oh, on
Tableau Public? Yeah, well, he has a lot more, but yeah, if you go on Tableau Public, there are a lot of visuals that we've created, but we'll be happy to share the workbook with anybody who emails us, for sure.
Yeah, Jake?
Good to see you, Jake.
Can we go back to the theme here?
Sure.
So when you made the decision to put it into different sheets versus putting a category. So you could have put category at the top and it would have like made one for each of them, but I mean, when do you make that decision?
I think for me, considering the space on the dashboard, and if I've been given really clear, concise requirements like Adam did, he wanted to see sales by products. So I knew that that's the gist of the project that he has. And I thought that if you vertically segment the dashboard by product, you know, you are able to see the values really clearly. And then horizontal, deliberately choice to make the horizontal distinction would be to go from overall context to granular. Considering the space and his requirement, I thought that was the best fit.
And it also depends on what you're doing. So because she wanted to pad those and make those segmented, you can't pad it in one sheet like that. The best you can do is a thick white border on there, and it's only like 10 pixels, where she's got about, 40 pixels on either side of the dashboard, padding it out. Mine is actually one sheet. If I flip over there, sorry, I was trying to come visit you guys. This is one sheet. So because my dashboard is tall, it's all in one sheet. So it depends on if you're trying to accomplish that spacing or if you already have it, if you're in the height.
You need to make a change to it. What would your one and then copy it 3 times?
Oh, you're saying how I would design it? How I would design it, you're asking?
How you would edit it if you had like
Well, yeah, if it's 3 different sheets, normally when I create a dashboard, I would try to create one worksheet that's really robust, that I know that I can copy. But you know, if you have stakeholders whose requirements keep changing, like, then you have to kind of live with it.
Once you figure out the outer and the inner, it's easy to just type that in. And it's like 6 of one, half a dozen the other way. Do you filter the dashboard over again and change colors, or do you just type in the number on the layout panel? So it's whatever, once you get used to it, it's pretty easy, but yeah, it's whatever you're most comfortable with. There's a lot of ways to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else? Right on time.
Cool. If you didn't get your question answered, our blog is 2 years old this week.
Yeah.
And we'll be drinking after.
So yeah, please get in touch with us if you have any questions. We are really active on social media, and you can also get in touch with us via thedataduo.com. Adam also has some business cards today if you want to stop by and say hi, since he's just visiting. I'm a native. But I'll see you guys again, and let me introduce you to Ken. So Ken's topic is going to be the next mystery topic, as he calls it. He traveled a little bit of a distance to get here today, and he's also the newly appointed Tableau Zen Master, so we need to get a selfie later. It has to be. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
All right, give me a minute here.
I just got this laptop, so I don't know where all the little things are. All right. Share the screen. Got it? All right. So, all right. Did everyone enjoy the data duo? I was excited to come, and I've heard him speak before, but I was excited to come again and get to see them and get to listen as well. So I'm so excited. I have to do a quick wardrobe change before we get going here. So I looked on your website to see if there was a new Adam shirt. There's none yet, so I had to wear the Puja one.
See, there is not one, because otherwise someone would choose.
Well, I wanted to do a custom one that had Adam on the back, but I just didn't have time to do that. So, all right. So, thank you for the introduction. As they mentioned, I was honored to become a Zen Master this year, along with Adam and another whole big group of really great people. In my work life, I am a business intelligence architect at Bucknell University. Anybody know Bucknell? I see one arm shaking back there. Well, it's about a couple hours, or about 3 hours northwest of here. If you're not aware of it, I know this guy really loves, oh, I don't have any volume. This guy really loves Bucknell. No sound though, but that's the movie The House. Check it out. Here's a picture of our beautiful campus. We're a highly ranked liberal arts university in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So, like I said, about 3 hours northwest of here. So I'm a business intelligence architect there. We have a relatively small team, so I do a little bit of everything with data, from ETL to data warehousing, architecting our platforms, and of course I work with Tableau quite a bit. I also do a lot of personal projects in Tableau, and to some degree I'll focus on some of those here today. But what I want to talk about is, the title of this is Beyond Show Me. So the idea is, how can we kind of go beyond the basic charts that are available within the Show Me panel in Tableau? So if you've worked with Tableau, you're very familiar with the little Show Me panel up in the right-hand corner of every visualization. It's always hiding there and ready for you to click on it. We'll zoom in on it a little bit here. So Show Me is basically a set of default out-of-the-box charts that are available for you in Tableau. There are 24 of them. And ultimately, there's a reason, I think, Tableau has chosen to put those 24 charts in there. For the most part, for most of your needs, one of those 24 charts is probably going to meet that need. Now, you might argue that a bubble chart or something like that probably shouldn't be in there, and a lot of people would argue that. But ultimately, you're generally going to find what you need here. In fact, I'm a believer that a bar chart or a line chart, in most cases, are probably going to meet your needs. But there are times where you might want to do something outside of what's available in this Show Me panel. And I'll give you an example from my own personal projects where I wanted to do that. So if we go back in time, I've been using Tableau for not quite 2 years at this point. And when I had just started out, I was just using this. I'd throw some things on the sheet and I'd click a bar chart or a line chart. I was doing very simple things, which is fine and good. Again, most of the time those are perfect charts. But I had this idea. I wanted to do a periodic table. And I wanted to make it an interactive periodic table. So I wanted to be able to hover over each of the elements and get, additional information. Who discovered it, when they discovered it, that kind of thing. And, still being relatively new and not having a full grasp of the platform, I just couldn't figure out how to do it. I kept going back to the charts on the Show Me panel, and I just couldn't see how I could make that chart from any of those things, right? So I just kept thinking about it and dwelling on it, and eventually it came to me. So let me kind of gray out our periodic table, and then let's draw a grid around it. So I'm just drawing some grid lines in between each element. And then if we add some axes to this, so we now have an x-axis and a y-axis. So what I realized as I was thinking about this is just laid out in a grid that we can plot on an x and y axis. I mean, I think we all remember high school math class where we'd plot our x and y coordinates. Maybe we'd draw a line, maybe we'd draw a curve or something along those lines. Well, this is really no different, right? Each of these elements has an x and y coordinate on this Cartesian plane, on this grid. So if we can go through there and we can manually figure out what those coordinates are. So for example, actinium is at x coordinate 3 and y coordinate y. Helium is 18 and 9. And we could do that for every single one of these elements. So that's what I did. I sat down with my grid and grabbed a spreadsheet and basically mapped out the x and y coordinates for every one of these elements manually. And then I started to visualize it. So I'm going to actually build this really quickly in Tableau from scratch. So we'll do a new workbook here. Connect to our data.
Version are you on?
I'm not sure. This might be 10.4 or 10.5. I'm not sure. It's my work laptop. We're not on 10.5 yet, so it's probably 10.4. All right, so I'm just going to take X and I'm going to drag it to columns, and Y and drag it to rows. And because Tableau has interpreted these as measures, it's just summing them up and giving me one. So you'll notice here, but ultimately what it's created is a scatter plot. So a scatter plot is really just, you're measuring, you've got one measure on one axis and one measure on the other, which is pretty similar to an X and Y Cartesian plane, right? But I want to get a point, I want to get a mark for every element. So there's a couple of ways to do that. For this, I'm just going to take name and drag it onto detail. Let's make this fit the width. So we're already starting to see this come together. It's got the basic shape and look of the periodic table. If I change my mark to a square and then just increase the size of those a little bit, now we're starting to look even more like a periodic table. Now the periodic table is generally colored by the category of the element. So I have that in my data set. I'm just going to take that and drag it to color. And then the last thing is to add some labels. So I'm going to take symbol, we'll center these, make the font a little bit bigger. Whoop. And now we have our basic periodic table. My final version looked like this. So you can hover and you get additional information from that. So if you've done this before and you've plotted X and Y coordinates using Tableau, this may seem like not a big deal, but for me, 3 or 4 months into using Tableau, this was a revelation to me because I started to realize that even though that Show Me panel has those 24 charts, that's not all you can do in Tableau. Basically, if you can figure out X and Y coordinates of anything, you can create anything in the world you can imagine. I believe it was Joe Mako who basically called Tableau a data-driven drawing tool. And essentially, that's what we're doing here. We're figuring out those coordinates and drawing something. We can take it a little bit further. We can connect. We can draw lines. We can draw polygons and things like that, right? So again, this was a revelation to me because it helped me to sort of break out of the confinements of Show Me. But one of the issues with what I did here is it required manually collecting the X and Y coordinates and creating that data set from scratch. So there are some times where maybe you want to automate that process. And that's where we will have to add in a little bit of math. And so I can see eyes rolling back in their head when I mention math. It's not too bad. It's awesome. I've always loved math. I know some people are a little afraid of it, but when you use it with Tableau and you're able to create some really cool things with it, it can be really exciting. So the two areas of math generally I'm talking about are trig and geometry. I'm not going to go into those. I'll give you some resources at the end where you can kind of learn a little bit about the basics of geometry and trig and how to apply them with your use in Tableau. But suffice to say that through use of a little bit of some geometric and trigonometric calculations, we can automate the process of figuring out our X and Y coordinates. So a good and simple example is a circle. And I'm going to put this in regular mode here. So what I've done here is I've used trigonometry, just basic cosine and sine formulas, and plotted 100 points on a circle. So if I hover, you can see the x and y coordinates of each of these points, which just looks kind of cool, but how, it's not really all that valuable ultimately, right? But there are some additional things you can do that might make it start to seem kind of interesting or potentially valuable. One thing is we can change it to a line, a T up here. So now I've got a closed, instead of points around a circle, I've got a closed circle, connected circle. I can also change that to a polygon, and now I've got this nice closed polygon. Again, you're probably still thinking, what value is this? Well, let's take this and sort of throw it down into the bottom here, and then let's add another circle to it, and then another circle, and then another circle, and then, you know what, let's just run it and let it go. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually using x and y coordinates multiple ways. I'm using x and y coordinates to figure out the center of these circles, and then based on that center, figuring out the outer points on these circles, and then just drawing polygons. And if I talk enough, you might start to recognize this as something that you've seen before. Does it look familiar? Anybody?
Oh, yeah, that's easy.
So by use of just bubbles, of just circles, filled polygon circles, we were able to layer them on top of each other and create this artwork, Starry Night. I'll talk about some practical stuff here in a minute as well. But in this case, we've taken a little bit of data, a little bit of math, and Tableau, and created art. So if you look at my Tableau public page, you'll probably see a lot of this kind of stuff where I'm just playing with things and doing artistic things. For me, I've always been a creative person, so finding Tableau that's able to sort of match my right brain to my left brain and allow me to use analytical skills as well as these creative skills, it's just like a perfect combination for me. So a lot of my personal work I do, these sort of artistic things. And so let me just give you a couple examples here before we move on to some practical things. So here's an example of, can't see it very well due to the resolution here, but I'd seen this infographic on the world religions years ago, and when I started with Tableau, I wanted to create it and had no idea. And then once I figured out this whole X and Y coordinate thing, basically just took the infographic and figured out those coordinates and was able to create this visualization. Basically breaks down the world's religions in a hierarchical fashion by the different traditions. So again, this is just plotting using circle shapes. I'm not drawing the polygons in this. I'm just using standard circle shapes in Tableau and plotting these X and Y coordinates. A more recent one I've done is this. Of course, it's going to refresh on me right when I'm about to talk. Should your internet be faster here at Comcast? So this is one that I did based on. Upgrade your internet here. Costs too much. So this is basically a report that's done that analyzes the risk of slavery in various countries. So it looks at the number of people living in slavery and then looks at 5 different measures, sort of risk factors of slavery and what the governments are doing to help those. So each country has these little flower type things, and the center of that flower indicates the proportion of people living in slavery. So we can see Uzbekistan has almost 4% of their population are actual slaves, even today. And then each of these bubbles on the outside indicate one of those risk factors, or rather what the government is doing to work with some of those risk factors. So smaller and red are bad, and larger and blue are good. So again, this is just X and Y coordinates. We figured out the X, Y coordinates of where these will go on the whole palette overall, or canvas overall. And then we figured out the X and Y coordinates of each of the bubbles that are wrapped around it. So that was largely manually sort of figuring out those coordinates. Another one I created was this. I had seen this album cover, album called Unbegotten, and it took the numbers of pi, first 5,000 characters, and drew them around a circle and then connected them with these nice curves and added some color. So I just had to recreate that. So again, this is some trigonometry and just drawing some curves in between those things. And then if you add another axis to it, we can actually do things in 3D. So here's a fun one I just did where I just took circles and layered them on top of each other and was able to create this 3D eyeball that's rotatable, just for fun. I actually created a sphere and showed it. Someone said, you got to turn that into an eyeball. So all right, so these are fun things, maybe not necessarily practical, although I will say there is, I think, some real value in doing these types of things, even though they may not seem practical. There's a few things you'll get out of exploring the edges of Tableau and trying to make it do these creative things. Number one, you'll learn to attack problems in a creative way. When you have a really tough problem, if you've gone through these tough problems like this and explored those edges, it's very likely you'll be able to come up with a creative solution. And the other thing is, it really is a great way to understand how Tableau thinks at a very detailed level. When you're doing these things and trying to make it do things that maybe other people haven't done, you really will get a great understanding of how Tableau works and how it thinks. All that being said, there are some really good practical examples of uses in Tableau. So one thing is maps. So I've taken, this is the sample Superstore data that we all know and love or hate in some cases, and I've calculated the profit per customer for each state. And if you throw that onto Tableau and you color it, you're going to get something like this, right? So there's some obvious problems with this. Any problems people see with this chart? With that? Right, yep. And because of that geographical space between the two, it makes everything real small. Plus, we have all this extra space around here that's totally wasted. You know, getting back to Adam and Pooja's recommendations, white space is good, but we don't want too much white space either, right? And what ends up happening is, can anybody tell how Delaware is doing from this map? So what ends up happening with this type of map is it overstates the importance of larger geographic areas. The first thing you see is that giant Alaska. Even though their sales or their populations or whatever is probably significantly lower than some of these smaller states here. And we've already normalized our data. We're looking at it at a per person basis. So size and geographic area and populations, those things don't really matter in this case because we've already done that normalization. So a really good technique for dealing with some of these problems is to use a hex map. So hex maps, these have gone through a series of innovation. I can't name all the different people who have participated in building these, but the hex map idea was mainly developed by Matt Chambers, who is a Zen master. But the idea here is we make each state a similar size, or the same size, and then we use these hexagons, which fit nicely together, and we're able to create this really nice map where if you want to know what's going on with Delaware, it's very easy to see what's going on with Delaware, right? They're laid out in a roughly geographical pattern. You can at least see regional differences and that kind of thing, although there's some concessions that have to be made in order to lay it out like this. But I think we'd all agree that this is a much better way of visualizing this data than the map that we did before. Now, ultimately, this is all just X and Y coordinates. When Matt built this, when he came up with this, he figured out the X and Y coordinates of each one of these states, and we're just taking that and blending it together with the Superstore data set and plotting those points. So, again, simple X and Y coordinates. Another slightly more complex one would be a Sankey chart. So Sankey charts show flow, so sort of change over time, how two different, always bad at explaining Sankey charts, but basically how one thing sort of changes over time and how that thing flows. One of the best examples I've seen is actually from Bucknell, where they look at our students. This is natural physical sciences, part of our College of Arts and Sciences. So they show the students and what they majored in. Sounds like my microphone's going down when I move over here. Is it? Can you still hear me okay? All right. So it shows the students' majors, and then at post-graduation, what their occupations, what industries they ended up working in. So I think this is a really good example of a use case for a Sankey. You can see here, we can look at biology students and see how many went to healthcare and medicine. We can see, which ones of our mathematics students went to banking and finance. But this can be a visually appealing as well as pretty useful chart in certain use cases. Now, this, again, is really just doing the whole X and Y coordinate thing. Using some trigonometry and some other math, we're able to kind of plot the points along these curves and then connect them all together and create these polygons, which give you this idea of flow across them. One last chart I'll talk about. Personally think this probably has not a lot of use cases in a practical, in a work environment, but there could be cases where this could be valuable. So a sunburst chart is really just a hierarchical chart. It's really a type of tree map ultimately. So the inner ring, and this is my religion data that I showed before. So the inner ring shows the religious traditions. And then as we move outside, out towards the edges of those rings, we start to break those down. So we can see Abrahamic religions break down into Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and then we can start to see even further breakdowns of the number of adherents to that. So there may be some cases where this could be valuable in a real life world, in a practical, in real life, if you will. Ultimately, probably using a regular tree might be better. There probably are other approaches, but if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more visually appealing, then a sunburst could be a valuable thing to create. And again, this is very similar to the drawing of the circles. It's figuring out the points around these circles and then connecting them together with polygons to create this custom chart. Or if you don't care about the practical stuff, you can just use Tableau to do some drawing of some cool things like I'm doing here. Just drawing lines to create something that will come into focus here in a moment. Thank you. Someone else wrote the algorithm for these things. I just made it happen in time. So someone else deserves most of the credit. That's all I have. I just want to leave you with a couple of resources. So you can check out my blog, kenflerlich.com. I wrote a 3-part series called Beyond Show Me, which goes through all this. Part 1, it's all about the X and Y. It was really just the whole discussion about the periodic table and figuring out those X and Y coordinates. Part 2, trigonometry. This is really sort of meant as a data visual, a Tableau user's intro guide to using trig to create new and interesting types of visualization. So I introduce trig, explain how it all works, and then help you to build a circle using trigonometry. And then part 3 is parametric equations. So parametric equations are, well, you might just need to read the blog, but they describe some really cool and interesting curves, and you can create some really neat things. And then if you're interested in the 2 artistic things that I created, there's some how-to blogs on the site for the geometric art and the loom art that I just showed. So that's it. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions?
I have a specific question. In the periodical table, can you move that?
Mm-hmm.
Legal gap between the top and the bottom.
Oh, I gotta find the final thing.
Because it's not the same size.
What you mean?
That gap, how did you do
This gap right here?
Yeah.
It's just coordinates. I just made a slight adjustment in the coordinates to create that gap. So this might be a y of 1, and this is a y of 2, and this is a y of 2.5 or 3.5 or something like that.
Sure. Question, but can you, with Paris,
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a parametric equation here. So I saw on Twitter that somebody had figured out the parametric equation to draw this really neat parrot. And as soon as I saw it, I knew I was going to have to figure out how to do that in Tableau. So again, this is just a parametric equation that calculates the X and Y coordinates, and I've connected them together with a line.
on the numbers, say in Excel, and then after that?
It depends. So everything, all the circle things that I was doing, that's all built in Tableau. So there is a data source, but I'm using bins to sort of artificially create additional points. There are bins and table calculations and things like that to artificially create those points. Sometimes the performance that you get from all those table calculations can get really ugly in Tableau. So, and what I generally recommend, well, in order to deal with those performance problems, sometimes it's better to do the data prep and do those calculations up front. But what I generally recommend for people that are just starting with this, is to try to eliminate, the complexity of bins and table calcs, and just calculate some of those points within Excel, and then get used to doing it that way, and then you can kind of move up to the more complex stuff. Yes. I'm trying to remember how I did that. I don't remember exactly how I got it to have that clean. I think I got lucky and just started dragging some things to see what it looked like, and it just worked out to look like that. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much. Hello. You can hear me when I walk.
job, Ken.
Close enough?
I like it closer. You stop cooking.
You go down.
So,
It's not projecting. Yeah. We're getting there.
so before we start, everyone just visualize Tom's face in there. That's how he behaves every time he sees a resin tool tip. So.
Yeah. So we're following up 2 or 3 fantastic Zen masters. So round of applause for them coming to Philly. We're saving the non-Zen masters for last. But we're going to cover Viz and Tooltips, which was a feature that Tableau came out in their 10.5 release. So let's just jump right into it. I guess before we start looking at them, who has used Viz and Tooltips before? Show of hands. Yeah. That sucks for you, yeah. Yeah. So everyone's familiar with tooltips in Tableau, and if you look on the first map of the U.S., I'm just hovering over some states, and I think anyone that's spent more than a day in Tableau would know what that is. Scrolling down, the 10.5 version, we can now embed visuals from a sheet into the tooltip. So Amar and I are going to kind of walk through some steps of A, how to do this, B, some like tips and tricks about kind of how to improve them. But just to start, I'm going to open up one sheet. I'm just going to create that map we just saw. So I'm going to double click on state, and I'll put sales onto color. So this is going to be like my base sheet, and we just have the generic default tooltip on it. So I'll create my new sheet, and this is where I can create whatever tooltip I wanted. So if I wanted to do a bar chart like we saw in the preview, I can go up to customer. I think I was looking at customer segments. There we go. And we can drag sales out, get a little bar chart. I'm going to put sales on label too. We can format how we like. Make it a little bolder. And then this is going to act as my tooltip. So I come back here, and just like I would edit any other normal tooltip, I would go into here, but instead of kind of inserting a field or rearranging these, I'm going to wipe these away, go to Insert on the top right, and there's a new option, Sheets. So I have all the different sheets that I've created in this workbook, and then I can select the one I want. So I just call it tooltip. I'm going to put it in. It puts this little dialog here, which we'll talk about in a second. Keep command buttons on always, right, Josh? Always keep those checked. And now you can see as we hover, it's actually filtering for whatever we're hovering. So when I'm on Oklahoma, I'm getting Oklahoma's data, and then you can see it changes as I go from state to state. So beat that.
So now that you all know how to visualize the basic tooltip in Tableau, I'll quickly jump into the tips part. So using parameters, we can toggle our tooltips as well. In case anybody is new to creating parameters, it's a 3-step process. Step one is quickly, we create our sheets that go into our tooltips. Here I'm just looking at profit by year. Same thing goes for sales and quantity. But then now I want to see it by state. So I want this to display in my tooltips. So like step two is I need to create my supporting calculations. So I have a calculation that's tooltip, which is nothing but I think you can literally copy paste the sheet width and height, especially in this case for a parameter it's mandatory to do that. So, but anyway, when in our main sheet, in our tooltips, what we have to do is like Tom showed, you go to insert and then you start inserting all your sheets. In my case, if you see here, profit, quantity and sales all are grayed out because I already have them in my tooltip pane. And then I also have my tooltip calculation here so that it filters whenever I change the parameter. Let's say just in case I didn't have the tooltip here, what would happen is it would display the entire data, and essentially instead of one simple neat looking tooltip, you'll see all three charts stacked on top of each other. I don't like how quantity looks, so let's see something colorful like profit, and now you have profit. Finally, you can also see sales. You can see sales. Just in case you want your chart to be static, but you want to toggle your insights and have them hidden, you can use this trick. What's it, Tom?
All righty. Tough to beat, but we'll bring it to the Sixers. I know Corey was watching the games. Who else was watching the Sixers? We got some people trusting the process here. I like to see it. So, you know, I just put some data together real quick. I just looked at the 5 different games, who won and what the score was. But I'm going to use Viz and Tooltip to, you know, help our audience understand what led the teams to victory in the 5 different games. So if you look at game 1, you know, Sam Hinkie really brought the Sixers to the playoffs to begin with, so we got to pay respects. And then game 2, the Heat won. So we'll give Dwayne Wade the credit for that. Team number 3, the phantom of the process, came back from injury. Game 4, Ben Simmons. And then game 5, Meek Mill rang the bell 3 hours after being released from prison. So we'll give him the credit for game 5. So, you know, obviously really cool, but how, you know, how did I get those pictures inside the tooltip? So this is the sheet we were looking at. This is just different text. But then the sheet I'm using for the tooltip is actually, and there's a few different ways to do this. I think it's easier to do custom shapes. So for every game, I'm just going to unhide the header here. But for every game, I assigned a different shape. So you can see it's the shape mark. If I go here, each game is assigned a different shape that I've brought into my Tableau repository. So as I go back, it's filtering on what game it is. So you see the headers there. But you can see the game kind of change with it as well. I think there's also some other ways to do it with I'm going to forget how to do this. Map, background images, I think. Yeah, I feel like custom shapes is the way to go for doing this. But yeah, pictures and tooltips.
So while Tom was busy having fun with the Sixers, I was working super hard for this presentation with my stakeholders, Adam and Pooja. I have a meeting tomorrow. Oh, just a second, excuse me. I think I saw Adam typing. So, okay, so I have an email from him. It's tagged high priority. We think the dashboard would look awesome in bright purple. So, we want our CEO excited. Is it possible to get this done before 8:15 tonight? Okay. So, now as a dashboard analyst, I wonder how I can solve this problem. I mean, clearly I don't want to use or paste bright purple all over this one. Maybe if I color my tooltips in purple, it's a win-win for both of us. Adam is happy, Pooja is happy, I'm obviously happy, that's more important. So lucky for me, in tooltips, we can color the background. Basically, your tooltips are nothing but sheets. So if you color your sheet, you can color your tooltip. So now, there you go. Like Adam, I hope I've got it done like by 8:03, so props to me. Yeah, but then I like the tooltip, I like the color, but I don't like how the titles are one after the other. Maybe I want some separation between them. So that brings me on to my next step. But before I go there, if you see, this is the sheet that I've created, bright purple, and I'm just using that in my tooltip. So moving on to the next step where I have some chart and then I have some tooltips in there. But if you notice, after some text that is a part of my tooltip, I have a separator and then I have my next chart coming in. Do you guys like the colors? That was on purpose. So what can I do to get that separator in there? So all I have to do is I literally use an empty sheet. So this is my divider sheet that I'm using in the tooltip. It's colored gray. If you look at my separator, it was gray. All I do now is I go into my tooltips and then I insert my divider here. If you see the sheets, the divider sheet is grayed out, meaning it is already inserted in my tooltip. And now let's say I want the height to be 4. I change it to 4. If I hover over, you see that my tooltip size has changed. But what if I want a divider under all of the tooltip, like in its entirety, I want a divider at the bottom of the tooltip as well. How can I do that? Like I've already used my divider once, it's grayed out, I'm not able to insert it again. So all you have to do is copy paste this, it's Control C, and paste it here. And that's it, there you go. You have a divider at the bottom as well. Go to you, Tom.
All right. So this one is very subtle. It looks a lot like the first one. So I'll go back to the first one. So as I said, when we hover over each individual state, you can see it's filtering the data for that state. But I might not want to filter on the state level. What if I want to look at the different, say, regions? So when I hover over a state, I want to look at that state's regions data. So you'll notice as I hover over states in the same region, the data is not going to change. So it's not actually filtering on the state, I'm filtering at a different level. And then only when I begin to move to a different region, as you saw there, that's when it begins to change. And actually, it would probably be easier to see if I region. Now you can see as I move to a different region, it changes, different region, it changes. So how do I filter at this different level of detail? Looking at the tooltip, and I'll actually just go back to the first one again. But as in the tooltip it says sheet name has the max width and height, so we can obviously change that to change the width and the height, and we'll do that in a second. But after that, there's filter, and by default, it's filtering at all fields. So it's essentially just going to take it to the most granular level of detail that's present, which in this case is state. Going back to the region level, I brought region onto the view, so Tableau recognizes what a region is, and I changed that all fields into region here. So now I'm telling Tableau to just filter whatever's in the tooltip by region instead of by state. And then you can see as I go across, there we go. Yeah?
All right. So a lot of maps today. So the next step would be on creating a tooltip, something that looks like this. What if you want, you have a map that is divided by regions, and then you want to break out your view by sales and quantity in your tooltip and show them by state. So if you've noticed, usually a tooltip, whenever you insert two sheets, it's tagged on top of each other. So here it's clearly side by side. So it's very easy to do this. All we have to do is make use of an empty sheet again and set its width to 2 times the size of your other 2 sheets that you want to bring in. So what do I mean by that? I'll quickly. So here I'm using an empty sheet, like literally empty sheet, there's nothing in here. When I go to my regions and go to my tooltip, all I'm doing here is, as you see, the empty sheet of mine is named border. I'm bringing that in. The maximum width here is 600. And if you see the 2 other sheets of mine, that is quantity by state and sales by state, if you pay attention to the width, both of them are divided into half, like 300 each. So that quickly brings them beside one another, and that's how you get this side-by-side view. Once again, by region, by state, 2 views side by side. And we have one last step for you all. It's kind of a biggie, so Tom will take it over.
All right, so now that we know how to put things side by side, you can begin to create stuff that looks like this. This is 3 charts in one. So we'll just kind of walk through this. This is, I guess, part A of the tooltip. So this is just the base. And then we need bar charts on this side and on top. So the bar charts on top are going to be looking at years, and the one on the right-hand side is going to be looking at months. So I have the months one here and the years one here. And just to make it a little easier as we're going along, I'm just going to bring the headers back. Okay, and then I just create my base chart. Actually, I'll just duplicate this and wipe off the tooltip. Okay, so let's begin making this. So let's kind of go in order. On top is the ones by year, which was in my poorly labeled tooltip, I don't know. This is the base, this is month, this is year. Going back here, let's bring in the year sheet. And as I'm going through, let's just kind of see what that looks like. All right, well, it's only giving me 1 bar. That's because it's filtering on all fields. So as I'm hovering over a point that was from 2016, it's only showing that. So instead of filtering by all fields, I'm only going to filter by whatever the line is. And the lines are just different categories. I'm going to put category here. Now let's see if that works. All right. Great, so now it's only changing as I go from line to line. I got one part of it, and let's bring in the others below it. Let's bring in the base part. There we go. And then to the next to that, I'm going to bring in the month. All right, see how that looks? All right, pretty bad. I just need to bring this category, because again, I don't want to be filtering by date. Oops. So I'm going to replace all fields by category. Okay, it's coming together. All I need to do is to begin just resizing the charts so that I can sort of fit them all the way I want. So I'm going to make this one max width of 600. That one's 3 and 3. All right, I'm going to cheat. I did it before. 5, 5, and 1. All right. Do 500. Next one, 500, and then 100. Preview. Okay, so it's starting to come together. This is to the left, so I'm actually just going to highlight that and center it. Now you can see it's in the center. So it's lined off slightly, but I'm just going to wing it. And then I just got to go back, remove these. And there we go. And you could obviously decrease the height as well, just like we were doing here. So if I want the height to be 300, I can make it 100, and that'll really shorten the bar on the top. But yeah, thank you. All of these. Yeah, we got all of these tricks from the Data Duo and from Jeffrey Schaefer. So they have blog posts on them. You know, Google Visit Tooltips in Tableau, and there are step-by-step instructions for all these. So, you know, if at any point there was a little confusion, there's step-by-step instructions online. We can.
It was literally a copy and paste. So.
But thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I noticed, Amar, in your first one of Tom and then Tom in your last one of Amar, you guys had the tooltip that said view too large to display. Do we know what's causing that, or?
So I think it's the height in this case.
So, especially in the parameter example, what happens is because you're stacking everything on top, it's trying to force everything, and in that example, if I've set my maximum height to 1 so that it will cut off and show me just one sheet. But usually in these examples, if you have maximum height set to 9, you won't see that view is too large. I mean, so let's quickly go in here and okay, here it's 100, but then let's change it to 200 and it's 300 here. Again, maybe demonstrate in this example where view was too large to show and maximum height is only set to 4. As soon as I change it to 9, you no longer see that. So it's finicky. It's in few cases. I mean, it depends on, again, in this I formatted my the tooltip text into 3 rows, because if not, this would take the width of the tooltip to be wide enough that you would see a lot of white space beside my scatter plot. So it really depends. Sometimes maybe it's trying to fit everything and it's just not enough space, so you see that. But the general rule of thumb is to have your height as 9 and 10.5 point, some version like beta 2 fixes that issue. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Really fun. Great. When you did the visualization into the tooltip, was this the last thing you did? Mm-hmm. So this automatically knows to go down and then left to right?
So it knows that. So from a sense, it's starting at the top, but you'll see this is all actually on one line. So if I click enter here and then look at it, then it starts to go on the other line. Yeah. So there is a max width in 600, right?
So it could be beyond 600.
Okay. It was hard to tell that was on the same line.
Yeah, yeah. So just by making sure that they're on the same line, like that, yeah. So that puts them next to each other.
I mean, 600 is a recommendation so that it looks neat on every point, but you could use 1200 or even 1000.
Any other questions?
You can't add dashboard to the sheet, right? Don't let you do that.
No.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, then you can have a visualization.
You can make your dashboard in here. All right, cool.
Good.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Okay. Did anyone come with Tableau questions that they didn't get answered? We could field some questions from the room. Got a question? Yeah, I'll give you the mic so it gets on the recording. No pressure.
I have a general question for the group, really for the room, not just the presenters, but obviously Tableau's #1 strength is its ability to visualize your data set. I'm wondering if anyone in the room has gone to some of the limits with Tableau's functionality in terms of forecasting and making predictions. Didn't see, obviously that wasn't a topic covered here tonight. I'm just curious if anyone's using that type of functionality in Tableau.
Anyone using like R or Python integration with Tableau?
Jake?
I've actually found that a lot more promise is not delivered that way, and that maybe it's better to analysis outside, kind of like some ETL work. It's better to do the analysis outside and then bring it into Tableau that way, as opposed to making, row-by-row calls to our server somewhere. How do you want to reiterate it versus
Here, I got it. So Brad's essentially saying that doing the data work upstream rather than in Tableau for any kind of predictive stuff will just help in the performance on the view. I think, and just, I guess my little opinion is like the R server and Python server are, I guess, good for kind of like ad hoc analysis like that, but like to productionalize anything like that, it's just gonna take a lot of time. I don't know if anyone else has anything.
So what do we do? What do we do about that?
Data work upstream. So just move it upstream. Hand it to someone else.
I mean, to that point though, so we have a lot of data scientists here at Comcast that are using those tools, and what we find is it's great if you're doing one-off analysis like locally on your hard drive and you want to do some sentiment stuff for public work, but when you suddenly want to look at billions of records, then it never makes sense to do that. So what we do is we kind of take the data, enrich it with R, Python, other, SAS maybe, and then put that back into our data warehouse and then report off of that. But it also means that we can, whatever those scores are, or information models, that can then be utilized by everybody across the organization. So we have about 2,500 Tableau users here, and then people use all kinds of other tools. So we then give that power to all the analysts, not just, the one time. But because it works like a table calc, it will just break the whole thing.
Yeah, and I took a sentiment of all of Donald Trump's tweets, and it took literally an hour just running that through TabPy to get all of this, to get the sentiment for all of them. And, with like a lot of searching and filtering, you can't expect anyone to wait an hour just for that. So what I did was I took the sentiment, copied and pasted it into Excel, then I had the sentiment, brought it in. So I wasn't actually querying in real time. It was kind of like offloaded.
It's also single-threaded unless you do special configurations. So if you're hooking it up to the server, really only a handful of people can access that before you start running into problems with the constrained resources. So. Any other questions? I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. we'll see, maybe our Zen masters will stick around for a few minutes if you have other more detailed questions.
Good job, Josh.
I don't really have to do too much work. You guys should bring merchandise for now. You know, like, this should be Zen merch. Zen merch? Yeah. You had it easy every time you looked through, like trading cards. Oh, yeah. You need Ken Polaris, you get the Ken. Well, that was kind of like, that was the, what's that thing? Data Boy did that. Oh, yeah? Yeah, like, stop the recording.
That's big joke.